there's a reason why in the practice of meditation, part of the practice is not to move. When I was doing a Vipassana retreat in which you meditated an hour at a time for, 9 or 10 hours a day, the idea of not moving became very, very challenging. And it wasn't until maybe the 4th or 5th day that they emphasized, please practice not moving. But the point of practicing not moving is it's just what you said, so that you can notice what happens when you don't move. Because when you notice what happens when you don't move, you're noticing the inclination of the mind to pull you into a pattern, right? To pull you into a pattern. If you have an itch, the pattern that it will pull you into is scratch the itch, right? The pattern it will pull you into is scratch the itch. And this is an example of the program of the mind, because the program of the mind is don't be uncomfortable, right? So if anything's uncomfortable, change it, control it, stop it. The problem with that is that if that's the program, then any time in life where anything is happening that's other than the way that you think it should be, or anything that's happening that is not comfortable, that you struggle with it, you cope with it, you resist it, you try and control it, you try and change it. And unfortunately, we live in a world right now that because that is the way the mind works, and that therefore is what the consumer buys, right? That we are able to be offered prescriptions and offered different substances that will work pretty quickly to change our experience. And so we can get away with it, right? But not always. And in the end, no, you can't get away with it, right? Because the other part of it is if you stay present to what's happening, you also notice that it passes. Everything passes. As the old Yiddish saying says, this too shall pass, when people are suffering. Everything will pass, including you, if you think you're your body, right? So there's a point to the practice of meditation in terms of not moving. There's a point to the practice of meditation in terms of being silent. And there's a point to the practice of meditation of being aware, relaxing the body but not going to sleep, being aware of attention, so that you can begin to notice what's happening with your attention. And you can begin to appreciate and understand that by noticing your attention and by noticing your ability to direct your attention, you gain access to a power that most people don't have. And the power of attention is the power of being able to notice when the attention is being taken by unnecessary, irrelevant, unrealistic thought patterns, right, that do you nothing but harm. This is commonly called mind wandering, daydreaming, that do you nothing but harm. It's when you're spending time with what's not happening. It's when you're giving your attention to what you're afraid of or what you want. So it's a mental process. It's the mind exercising itself in terms of consistently ruminating about what I want, what I don't want, what I like, what I don't like, what I have, what I want, what I don't want, what I'm afraid of, what I'm interested in, what I desire, what I want to avoid. If you pay attention to the mind when it's wandering, you'll see that that's what's happening. It's either trying to hold on to pleasure and pleasurable situations or trying to avoid negative, uncomfortable situations. And it doesn't work. It all is just a system, right? A system that's fear-based, a system that is programmed to survive, and that can become a convoluted, twisted, demented, distorted reality. That's why so often when you hear about these mass shootings, you also hear not too long afterward that the person was a mental health case, right? That their state of mind was such that they had deviated far enough away from the understood reality that we live in that it was making sense to them to do what they were going to do. Now, we look at that way, right? But in our case, in terms of what we're doing here, right, I suggest that you look at yourself that way. Look at how mechanical your behavior is. Look at how when patterns run without your noticing it, that you just do what you do. It's automatic. Anger is obviously an example of this. You know, when you're angry, and you're really angry, and when you look back at how you behaved, it was obvious that something was running the show and it wasn't you. Because you regret what you did. And it's obviously harmful and destructive and cost and resulted in negative consequences. That's why we're here. Right? If there was no solution to it, right? Now here, I've been interested in suicide, not personally, but going along with what I just said, if there was no answer to it, then suicide would be a perfectly rational thing to do. Because if there is no solution to it, it's hopeless, isn't it? It's hopeless. There's nothing you can do, right? You'll be a detriment to yourself, right? And in the end, you'll get old, sick, and die. There's nothing to really look forward to, right? So it's hopeless. Hopelessness is the truth, by the way. It really is hope. There is no hope. Things are going to be the way they are. Hope is ridiculous when you really examine it. But I was thinking about suicide, and it's very interesting if you really analyze suicide, because suicide is actually an intelligent response to the truth. You know, when people are suicidal and they feel hopeless and they have no interest in the future and they have no interest in living anymore, it's because they're seeing things as they actually are, right? And so the idea of wanting to escape from that is not, that's not crazy. That's why we're here, isn't it? Right? However, here's the interesting thing. Almost all of the people who commit suicide fail. And I'm talking about the ones who actually do kill themselves. They fail. There's a number of ways to look at this to see what I'm talking about. First of all, if you're going to commit suicide and you're doing it to escape from the stress and the suffering and the pressure, right, and the hopelessness of life, right? You're doing it to escape from that. There won't be anybody to experience the relief. So you're not just ending the experience of life, right? You're ending the one who's seeking the relief of that experience as well. Or you think you are, right? But this is where suicide fails for most people, because if you really look closely at it, if you're going, and this is how Eckhart Tolle woke up, by the way. He was about to kill himself. And just before he actually acted on it, he stopped long enough to notice, wait a minute, I'm going to kill myself. Who is the me that's going to kill me, and who is the me I'm going to kill? And he realized something's wrong here, right? And if you analyze it, right, if you're going to kill yourself, the first and most important thing to be clear about is who you are. Because if you're going to kill yourself, that's the self you're going to kill, right? So it's very important to know what the target is. Very important to know what or who it is that you're going to kill so you can succeed, right? Now, since most people are so identified with their physical body, they don't go through the process I'm talking about. They just figure killing the body is killing me. So they kill the body. But one of the things we speak of here, and one of the things that's talked about in these teachings and practices, is that we are not your body. So if you're interested in killing yourself and you kill the body, you didn't succeed. You didn't succeed. Now watch. If you do go through the process of answering the question, well, who or what am I, so I know exactly what to kill, right? Then you go through the same process as Ramana Maharshi talked about. You go through the same process that we talk about here. You go through the process of self-inquiry. You go through the process of asking yourself, who am I, right? That's what you do, right? And how do you answer the question? Well, you look to see what's the evidence say in terms of who I am. How do I know who I am? How do I know that I exist, right? And if you go through that process, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel because this process has been gone through and spoken about and written about in spiritual teachings for thousands of years. So if you're smart, you refer to that. That's kind of like the Wikipedia of reality, right? And if you look at it, you see, okay, so the me that I'm going to kill is the me that is my personality, it is my person, it is my psyche, it is my, well, how does all that show up? Well, it shows up in thinking. It shows up in thinking. So when thoughts occur, the way that I view that is that they're my thoughts. I'm thinking those thoughts, and those thoughts tell me that I'm thinking those thoughts. Those thoughts tell me I'm thinking those thoughts. Those thoughts infer that everything that happens to me, right? That's what I think. That's what you think, everything. And not only do I think that, but it feels like it's happening to me too, doesn't it? Yeah, my physical sensations, it feels like it's happening to my body, it feels like it's happening to me emotionally, right? But all this is occurring in a mental state, right? It's all occurring in a mental state. So if you pursue the question of who am I, you eventually arrive at the conclusion that who I am is a concept, a self-concept, a self-image, an idea, right? That's who I am. And because that's who I am not physical, right? And because that's who I am, if I really look closely, I can see that since what I am is not actual and not physical, and it's a concept, and it's a psyche, and it's a personality, and it's a self-image, and none of that actually exists, now I arrive at the conclusion that in order to kill myself, all I have to do is see that I never existed in the first place. Once I see that, I've succeeded. I've succeeded. I committed suicide. I killed myself by realizing the self that I wanted to kill never actually existed, right? And so without doing anything, I succeeded. And once that occurs, what's left, because I'm still here, right? Once that occurs, what's left is reality, is the truth, is who I actually am, which is the awareness that was in the background all the time that I was ignoring. And I also realize, if I go through that process, that now I don't have any need to kill myself because the self that I know myself as, which is awareness, doesn't suffer. Problem solved. Problem solved. That's what we're up to. That's what we're up to. But you see, most people think suicide is a tragedy, right? Because they think that when you kill the body, that you kill the self. But one of the things that is part of this teaching and these processes is not just understanding that that's not true, but more importantly, the direct perception that it's not true, the direct experience that it's not true. And that's what meditation makes possible. Because when you redirect your attention away from the thought process, if you manage in doing that with consistency over time, right, it becomes more and more possible to notice what's not true. It becomes more and more possible to notice that when my attention is away from the thought process, that what is there is presence, what is there is real, what is there is actual, and it's not a person. And it doesn't suffer. That's why Mooji and Rupert Spira and many of the other teachers go into details about, oh, what is your true nature, right? It's timeless, it's formless, it's not physical, right? It's not a man or a woman. It's not coming from anywhere, it's not going anywhere, right? To see the nature of your true nature allows you to see that it's free. It's free. It's just happy. So this whole business of talking about suicide is interesting. I was considering doing some writing about it, and one of my closest friends, who was the editor of my last book, I shared that with him, and he said, I don't know about that. My gut tells me you should stay away from that word. Right? Because anytime people see the word suicide, especially if you make statements like that you recommend it, right? But the suicide I'm recommending is not the one that most people understand to be suicide, right? So he suggested that if you make statements like that, that people will get upset, right? And they will seek to censor you, right? Or worse, right? I don't know. I'm still contemplating it, because, you know, sometimes you need to shake people up. You know, and I think a title to a book needs to get people's attention, even if it's shock, right? It's like Abby Hoffman wrote a book, and the title of the book was Steal This Book, right? Then the other thing I was thinking about is what is it when you're possessed? What do they call that? Possessed by demons. And then you get, the priests come and they do an exorcism. Exorcism, right? And that's an interesting thing too, because in a way, when you look at what we talk about here, you are possessed, right? You're possessed by an energetic reality that doesn't actually exist, right? The only thing that makes it different from the movie, The Exorcist, is in the movie it's Satan, right? And you can tell when Satan's possessed the body, because Satan says terrible things and makes the body elevate, and makes the person throw up green vomit on you and all that stuff, right? Good movie. But in real life, right, the one that possesses you, now watch, this is interesting. In real life, the one that possesses you has you think that you're that. Has you think that you're that. So how do you escape from that possession? Because you're being what is possessing, you know, the reality of what you actually are. That's why this business of practicing and studying these teachings is difficult, right? Because the listening that you are has become such a habitual listening of what possesses you, that what you hear is, you hear from the listening of what possesses you. And it's very tricky, because the listening of what possesses you will be interested in the message, but only from the perspective that what possesses you wants to continue to possess you. And if it can do that and get the benefits we're talking about here, it's on board. But of course it can't do that. So the time has to come when that which possesses you can be releases, right? That which possesses you releases. And therein lies the trick, you know, how do you get to that? How do you get to that? And one of the things that is spoken of in regard to that is an interesting paradox, and the way you get to that is not to try and get to that. It goes back to the suicide. The way you kill yourself is to just realize that you don't exist. Right? The way you get to have the idea you have of yourself release its grip on you is to notice it never had a grip on you. That's the trick. That's the trick. But the way your mind works and the way the brain works, it doesn't see things like that. The way it sees things is in time. The way it sees things is something has to happen. Something has to change in order for you to become what you really are. No matter how many times you're told that's not true, right? No matter how many times you're told that, left on your own, it won't be long before you're back in the process of trying to be that, right? It won't get through. It won't get through. And so that's why it takes time. That's the process that you have to keep being frustrated in your attempts to be what you already are. You have to keep trying to be something that doesn't require your trying, until the time comes when you completely resign. You know, Tony Parsons, one of the people that teaches the Neo-Advaita format, I was talking to one of the people that I consult with today, and she was sharing with me, I didn't know this about him, but she was sharing with me when I was talking to her about the whole idea of letting go and just giving up and so forth. And she said that the story he tells about his process, and of course when he tells it, he says the apparent process, right, is that he gave up and he just went and played golf for a year and he didn't give it another thought in terms of trying to realize who he was. Stopped seeking completely, just, I'm not doing that anymore, and went and played golf. And then all of a sudden, after having completely given up, at one point he was looking down at the rug and he had this experience of himself disappearing. There was nobody looking at the rug. Mooji reports the same thing. He was told by Papa G, when he had the guts to sit in front of him and ask him a question, Papa G said to him, in order for you to experience what you want to experience, you have to vanish. And Mooji got pissed off. He got pissed off and he left and he went to his room and was packing his bags to leave. And he went down to take a walk before he left, and he was walking around and he sat down and he was experiencing this thing of giving up, you know, resigning, like, you know, screw this guy, this is crazy, I don't know what he's talking about, I'm out of here, right? And in the space of in the space that was there, by him no longer filling that space with his efforting, in the space that was there, by him no longer filling that space with his efforting, he looked down at his hand and he couldn't recognize it as his. In other words, he disappeared. He wasn't there. Now that doesn't mean, whether we're talking about Mooji or Tony Parsons or Ramana Maharshi, that those experiences became the consistent experience that they were having, right? You can't do that. You can't be in the world that way, right? But having had the experience, it's irrefutable in terms of the shift that occurs that doesn't go back. The transformation that occurs that's permanent. That's the same experience that I had when I experienced my own death, right? That when I saw the completion of the experience of dying for me was the recognition that what was dying never existed. That was the completion, right? And that experience of seeing that and that coming to an end, that which seemed to be real, being seen that was never real, right, stayed with me ever since. Once that happens, there's no going back. Once you see things as they are, you can't undo it. You can't undo it. And that's a good thing, right? See, it gets very weird, right? Because if I go back and try and really look at what happened, what I see and what people like Tony Parsons say and other people is that nothing happened. Nothing happened. Right? Because who I thought I was never existed. So it didn't have to stop, didn't have to end, right? So nothing happened. That's what is meant when we say nothing has to change. Nothing has to change because you already are what you are. And you're already not what you're not. So nothing changes. It just becomes evident. It's evident. That's why they say, you know, what this is about, the difficulty with what this is about is its obviousness. It is so obvious that you just can't see it. You keep looking through it. Right? The truth, the non-dual truth is veiled. The non-dual truth is veiled in the consistent and persistent illusion of separation. The consistent and persistent illusion that there's you and the world, duality. That's the illusion that's hiding the truth, because that's not real. There is no duality. You and what you see is the same thing. So I encourage you to just stay the course. It's part of the process. You can't avoid trying. You can't avoid trying. So if anything, You know, it's like I said to one of my students, I ran into the bathroom and I said, oh, how you doing? I haven't seen you for a while, right? This guy's a psychologist. Right? He said, oh, I don't know, man. It's like I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall when it comes to this stuff, right? And I said, oh, well. I said, could I give you some advice? And he said, yeah. I said, bang your head harder.